I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, brand new episode of the CJ Show. It is Thursday. We're going to start off with something, a name of a segment I just came up with on the fly. Leafs Corner, because we're going to have to talk a lot about the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is pretty much in your wheelhouse because, of course, you follow the Toronto Maple Leafs regularly with columns that you write about in the Toronto Star and also covering the NHL, of course. And also a big shout out to the homies at North Star Bets because we have to shout the homies out. But anyway, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
We've already got a segment about this. It's called the Steve Dangle Podcast, don't we?
We do have we have a show, essentially. Well, it's not our show. It's part of the SDPN. I mean, we could leave it to them, but we do have a lot to talk about with the Leafs, especially with the fact that Jake Muzzin is on LTIR. Rodion, it's Amirov or I think I got the Amirov. Sorry, unfortunately. Yes, it's all good. Unfortunately, diagnosed with a brain tumor and some pretty significant losses for the Leafs in the last few days. And they're a team that's expected to be pretty active ahead of the trade deadline coming next month. So, yeah, we are going to spend a considerable amount of time on this podcast talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I guess we should start with the Jake Muzzin LTIR injury. Suffered against the Montreal Canadiens in a pretty unfortunate accident. I think he ran into Chris Weidman, if I remember correctly. But now he is on long-term injured reserve. I guess before we get to the whole, before we get to salary cap issues and what that can mean for the team there, just a note on Jake Muzzin, if you can. Like, this is not the first time he's had to deal with some major injury since he's joined the Leafs.
Yeah, he's had a really difficult season. And that's after two playoffs, the last two Leafs playoffs, he got injured during the series. Montreal was game 6. He had a groin injury, and then he had an unfortunate incident in the bubble with Columbus. So, it's been a couple tough years in a sense for Jake Muzzin because obviously you get to his stage of his career. The reason and the importance he carries with the Leafs, it's in those moments you want him to be there for. And here we are again with some uncertainty. And, if there's maybe some positive, if you're looking for the little bit of sliver here, is that he's not a player who's actually had concussion trouble throughout his career. He doesn't have a long history of diagnosed concussions or head traumas among, the injuries he has suffered. But the downside is that he had one in January and that took him quite a while to recover from. And now he's got another one that he's recovering from in February. And, there's pretty much an acceptance, from Jake, his agents, the team. I think everyone's on the same page that it's going to be a fairly long layoff just to get a sense of it because he did have, some pretty significant symptoms the last time around. And I think caution is the name of the game. And as you say, it's a total fluke play. He loses an edge, slams into Chris Weidman. There's no fault to be assessed. There's almost like not too much thinking to be had about it other than it's just unfortunate how it happened. And, it creates now this dynamic heading into the trade deadline that wouldn't have been there because he's already been placed on long-term injured reserve. But the Leafs can really only use that cap space with deadline acquisitions if he's gone for the rest of the regular season. And, we're only a couple days since this incident happened. And at this point, no one knows for sure. And so there's going to be a ton of talk about that. A lot of closely studying the Leafs roster moves for hints about how they feel about it. And then, obviously we hope the best for Jake and his recovery as well.
Absolutely. I was reading a piece from our buddy James Myrtle earlier this morning, essentially kind of just wondering what the Leafs could do if with Jake Muzzin on LTIR ahead of the trade deadline. And you can correct me if I have it wrong here, but I think with the fact that Rasmus Sandin was demoted and they called up 2 other players, it'll kind of help build up some salary space. And with Jake Muzzin on LTIR, the Leafs could essentially put themselves in a situation where they could exceed the cap by a little over $5.6 million. That's me trying to use my brain.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it as simple as possible for those that aren't well versed in the CBA. Essentially, before you place the player on LTIR, you can go over the cap by his cap hit, but any amount you have left under the ceiling when you do it, that eats into it. And so what the Leafs did, and this does sort of signal that they're maximizing their space there, is they called up Christian Rumens and Brendan Mennel, who I don't believe are roster options for them. This is on an off day. They sent down Rasmus Sandin, and the balancing of the books in that got them, I believe, within about 20,000 of the cap ceiling. So then when they placed Jake Muzzin's $5.625 million contract on, it leaves them more than $5.6 million in room, give or take. And some of these numbers are a bit rough because, we lean on the good folks at Puckpedia and Cap Friendly for these numbers. But literally, if they had one player's roster designation off this season, the numbers would be a little bit, off, and the league doesn't publish those numbers. But within, for being general and very close to accurate, the Leafs have about $5.6 million that they could add today. But of course, if they went and traded for a $5 million player just for fun today, Jake Muzzin was ready to play before the regular season ends, they'd have to clear $5 million off the cap to make that happen. So, they'll have to be strategic in how they use this. I have a feeling they don't know for sure themselves. I mean, they put themselves in a position where they have that room, but they probably don't know yet just what Jake Muzzin's prognosis is going to be, how that all unfolds. But certainly by March 21st, which is the trade deadline, they're going to have a lot better idea of his recovery timeline and whether a trade can be made. And, the Leafs wanted to be active anyway. I think that they were in a position where they're considering maybe removing more assets as part of other trades to take on salary. And so this could end up being some kind of blessing in disguise. No one's cheering, of course, for an injury, but this is a sport where players routinely get injured. It's dangerous and physical. And so this could wind up allowing the Leafs to add another player and then hopefully be in a position to bring Jake Muzzin back in at some point before the big games of the playoffs. But again, it's a little too premature to say 100% that's what's going to happen. I just think it's definitely a possibility or an avenue that the Leafs might be going down.
Because, the Leafs could just pull a Tampa and just not play Jake Muzzin until the playoffs. The Vegas Golden Knights are doing that with Mark Stone, it looks like. Why not do the same thing?
I think so, but I think there's some subtle differences, right? Like Mark Stone's, they've been managing that back injury throughout the year. They knew they had to activate Jack Eichel. I'm not saying it's conspiracy theory, but I think that there was some time maybe to plan for that. That's all. This is within the rules, man. Like Mark Stone has legitimate back injury. Like that's not a question. I think the only thing the league might look at closely with that is how long does he need to be out? What's the treatment plan? Like, are you using this as an advantage? But to this point, they haven't done anything wrong. Like long-term injured reserve exists. Half the league is in it. Half the league is exceeding the cap or pretty close to half because of it. This happens every season. I think what we've seen some teams do is be strategic. I don't think there's anything strategic about a concussion. Like that, the freak play that wasn't planned. There's no, as much as sometimes, we like talking about the way the Leafs manage their cap, Brandon Pridham gets a lot of shout outs, in charge of managing the Leafs cap for being kind of a wizard. I saw Mike Stevens say he wishes he could do his taxes. He'd have the Canadian government thing.
In Pridham, we trust.
There is a lot of fun with that. And look, he's done a lot of crazy stuff over the years because the Leafs have been dancing the cap dance for a long time. This is actually different in my view because it's a concussion. And, I've talked to people on both sides. I've got no indication. I don't think they're like, okay, he's done for the regular season. It's not like that. But look, let's see how he recovers. Let's see what happens. I think the Leafs will still potentially make moves where they're taking salary off the roster to bring salary in. But if it gets to March 21st and Jake Muzzin doesn't look like there's any hope of him playing before the end of April, well, then that's a whole lot more cap space for the Leafs to maybe be in on some of the bigger names than we would have guessed.
Before we get into the whole, the Leafs idea of maybe clearing out more salary, are you a sucker for a good conspiracy theory? I know you mentioned the term conspiracy theory in your last answer.
Well, I don't mind one, depends on the subject matter.
You know what? I'm just going to leave it there before we start getting way too crazy.
Your drink. I'll get a little coffee here. Get a little shot.
Yeah, do that. Shout out Collective Arts. So we know the deadline coming in a little less than a month. When you say that the Leafs could be in a position to, offload some salary, I'm just kind of curious if you could elaborate on that a little bit more. Just kind of give us a very early insight on what the Leafs could do ahead of the deadline, especially with Jake Muzzin on LTIR.
Right. This should be framed as what they could do, not what they're necessarily 100% going to do.
Exactly.
Earlier this season, the Leafs made Travis Dermott and Justin Hall available. They've since made a trade now for Ilya Lyubushkin over the weekend, and they have a lot of bodies back there. I mean, the game they played in Montreal earlier this week, they had to scratch Rasmus Sandin, and I don't think there's any way that you would look at that and say that was a scratch based on merit. I think it's trying to spread around those nights off for players. Now, it turns out Jake Muzzin got hurt, and so this might complicate matters a little bit depending on what the prognosis is in for him. But I could see them trading potentially. I think Dermott seems to be more the odd man out, but one of Dermott or Hall is part of getting another defenseman. I know I haven't really gone through the mental exercise of how it works if they have some thought that Jake Muzzin might not play for the rest of the season. Again, we're working in theoreticals here. This isn't hard reported news. The other thing I can tell you that's a little more newsy is the Leafs do want to address their second line. And in an ideal world, in a perfect circumstance, I think they'd like to get another winger to play alongside John Tavares and William Nylander. And, probably ideally, if there's no cap, they would love to do that while bumping Alex Kerfoot, who's currently in that position, down their lineup, because that would make them a deeper team. But, maybe there's some kind of trade to be made where Kerfoot's being removed from the roster. His name's been involved at past trade deadlines. He makes over $4 million. So not really a comment on the player. He's actually that line has recently run into trouble the last 10 games or so. But if you look at the season as a whole, Kerfoot's been very productive and had a good year, but kind of just a little bit of an odd man out situation with a team that's trying to win the cup and is in a cap position that's a bit precarious. It reminds me of Andreas Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen a couple of years ago. It's not like the Leafs wanted to get rid of those players at that time. It was really cap related decision making because of what they made. And so I think you could see a scenario where that happens. Again, I'm sure they'd prefer to do it where they keep them because they're trying to win the cup. They'd love to have them on their third or fourth line. That would be a benefit. But, the way this world works, you just can't keep everyone. I mean, what the Leafs have basically chosen to do for about 4 or 5 seasons now really is they've kept the obvious guys, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Morgan Riley, paid them well. They extended Morgan Riley the season, and almost everybody else is interchangeable. If you even go back to when James Van Riemsdyk and Tyler Bozak were free agents, the Leafs just played it out, let them walk. Jake Gardner played it out, let him walk. Nazem Kadri got traded. They kept Tyson Barrie, played it out, let him walk. I mean, essentially they've been cycling a lot of players through the other positions. And, I think that's going to continue. Honestly, that isn't the only way that would change is if a decision was made to trade one of the core pieces at some point. And as long as Kyle Dubas is a GM, I don't believe he's going to do that. I think he's pretty steadfast in his belief that this is the way to make it work. Done a nice job of filling in around the margins. Michael Bunting's, to give one example, is having a fantastic season. They signed him for $950,000 on the cap. He's got 16 goals. He played 26 games in the NHL before this year. So, I think that this has proven to be a model that can work, despite the fact they haven't gotten over the hump in the playoffs. And I think it's going to continue at the deadline. I really believe the Leafs are going to be decently active, in this deadline. And, they're all in to win, right? I mean, what's to save at this point? I was doing radio somewhere recently, and they asked me, like, this is different than the Penguins back in 08, 09. I was like, yeah, well, the Penguins in 08 had Crosby still on an entry-level deal. Like, they had more time to plan for more kind of cup runs. Like, the Leafs are still looking for the breakthrough, and you're in the 6th year of Matthews and Marner. And, I know we touched on a previous podcast, you just don't necessarily have those guys forever. Or even if you keep them, maybe you got to pay them more and the cap troubles get deeper. Like, you got to treat every year like a fine diamond. And you got to polish it as best you can. And that's what the Leafs front office is doing right now.
That's a very good point. I also, I believe Michael Bunting has 17 goals. And if he's not tied, he's at least near the top of goals scored by rookies in the NHL this year. And also when you describe the needs for the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of help needed on D and possibly someone on the wing, without saying it, the Leafs look, Damon Severson and JT Miller might be good additions for this team. You know what I'm saying?
They might be. I don't think it's limited to that. I think Josh Manson makes sense. As I've said, the Leafs have at least phoned on Ben Sherratt. That hasn't gone anywhere, but doesn't mean they can't circle back or there might not be a fit. I guess the question becomes, are they looking for a right-handed D or left all of a sudden? And a lot of that's tied to Muzzin. I mean, for years, 2 or 3 years now, the Leafs have had Riley in their first slot on the left side, and then they have Jake Muzzin on the second slot on the left side. It's been unchallenged, essentially. It's kept a player like Rasmus Sandin, who's a left shot, from sort of advancing higher in the lineup too much. I mean, now I presume he'll get that opportunity with Muzzin out injured. Maybe he thrives in that role. Maybe they don't need that position. Like, I think a lot more than people would probably believe is still up in the air, frankly. I mean, it's 3.5 weeks to the deadline. There's a lot of games to be played in that stretch. And I really think the front office is going to have to evaluate where they're at, see, are they comfortable Sandin playing in that spot? I mean, sometimes, crazy thing about injuries, sometimes you learn something about your team. Maybe a player takes a step, maybe it goes the opposite way, and you don't have quite what you thought there yet, and you have to address it with the trade. And so I don't think it's written in the stars yet, but it's pretty clear that they've done it. They've circled the D market to figure out what they have there. I think they're sizing up potential players that could play on the second line. I mean, JT Miller would be a perfect fit style-wise, hockey-wise, how productive he is. I just don't know that. I don't know if that trade will materialize. And, I'm not sure Vancouver really wants to trade him, frankly. So that might also, that might be a real big fly in the ointment as we're talking about a player that doesn't get traded. But he fits what the Leafs want too, because I think in a perfect world, if the Leafs are making these deals, they'd like to not get rentals. And I realize I named some rentals, but I think they'd like players with term, 2 kicks at two playoff runs instead of 1 or 3 or 4, whatever it ends up being. So look out. I do believe that this will be a busy deadline for the Leafs, though. Too much riding on the season. Kind of no one wants to react to just a couple games when they've been as good as they have been all year, but it's going the wrong way on them right now. Lots of talk locally here about their goaltending and if that needs to be addressed. I don't get the feeling right now that that's something they're looking at doing. I think that there's a lot of confidence. This is a blip for Jack Campbell versus a trend, a spiral into being an 880 goalie. I don't think that they think that's going to happen. So, there's going to be lots to talk about. More Leafs Corner to come, but
more Leafs Corner to come for sure, because I know a lot of people who listen to the Chris Johnston Show will appreciate that. And if that means we're going to have an active Toronto Maple Leafs team at the trade deadline, I'm thinking of you the run up to next month, because you're going to be very, very busy, I would imagine.
Well, it's fun. It's fun watching a team try to get it done, right? Like, and I realize they haven't even won a playoff series yet, so it seems somewhat premature, but I think you want 2 things in sports, honestly. You want to be following a team making interesting moves and building itself up from like a bad stretch, which, like Montreal is going to try to do now. Like, I think that's interesting, like evaluating their moves, plotting what they're doing. Or you want a team that literally could break through and win, and you're doing everything you can to win. I think sometimes when you get in the middle there, where if you're realistic and you're 12th overall in the league, you probably aren't good enough to win. And sometimes that can be a little repetitive. But I think teams at the very bottom and at the very top, how they're operating can be fascinating. And there's going to be theater in Toronto this year. I mean, like right now they're due to play Tampa in the first round. I know there's 30-odd games left. That could change. They could fall back or maybe pull ahead. But, they're playing Tampa, Florida, or Boston most likely in the first round if we want to expand it. And either way, it's pretty delicious series in terms of the Leafs being an underdog, probably potentially against all 3 of those teams. I mean, it depends what you think of Boston. And that this being the 6th year they might go out in the first round, man, like there's a lot riding on the next few weeks for management, and then the next couple of months for absolutely everyone in that organization.
For us to take an ad break here and talk about your balls. It's way more funny when Adam does these jokes. I don't know. Anyway, we're here to talk about the Ultra Premium Collection from Manscaped. You're going to take care of your balls. Yeah, nope, still not funny. Anyway, it's actually not for your private part, so I don't even know why I'm even really bringing up your balls. But anyway, it's a leveled up hygiene routine with your favorite manly scent. An all-in-one skin and hair care kit for the everyday man and covers you from head to toe. Literally. Manscaped is trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off free shipping with the code CHRIS21. Also, you should write in the comment section that Chris should be doing some of these ads. But I'll tell you what, he's got some of these Manscaped products. I got some of these, Adam has some, I mean, of course, dude lives off Manscaped. Why do you think he has the nice, like, basement that he has with the studio? That's all Manscaped, baby. Chris21 is the promo code you got to use to take advantage of the deal that they have. They'll kick you 20% off, but also the ultra premium collection, which will give you some stuff that'll help you groom yourself, not just with your balls, above the waist too. Chris21 at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping. Hey everyone, we got to talk about HelloFresh. You can get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep with HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. They have fit and wholesome recipes for satisfying and nutritional meals that you can feel good about. And with recipes, about 6 recipes a week to choose from, including low-calorie and carb-conscious options. They've got stuff like beef tenderloin and cheese fondue, and miso sesame shrimp and bacon ramen. Actually sounds pretty good. I'm actually kind of hungry. I want to see if I can take advantage of that. Go to HelloFresh.com/SDP16 and use the code SDP16 to get up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. It's a lot of gift giving. HelloFresh.com/SDP16 and use code SDP16 to get up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. It's a pretty good deal. So yeah, HelloFresh. You have a better pulse on the Leafs fan base than I do. Quick exercise for you. You mentioned those 3 teams, Tampa Bay, Florida, and Boston, all possibilities for the Leafs to face in the first round of the playoffs. If you can you order them from 1 to 3, 1 being the team Leafs fans would want to avoid the most, 3rd being the team they would much rather play amongst that trio? So among Boston, Florida, and Tampa.
First thing you need to know, Leafs fans are conditioned to believe that everything will go wrong at any moment.
Yes, I understand that. But I imagine there is at least some team out there where their anxieties won't perk up as much.
So my answer would be they would probably just least likely to face Boston just because of the ghosts in the closet. Second least likely to face Tampa because Tampa's damn good, but there's not really a thing. And like the team they're probably most hoping for is Florida. Now, what's funny about that is if you're asking me to rank what the Leafs should be hoping for, I might have Florida #1 team you don't want to face, because I actually believe, and backed up by our man Rod Brindamore and our $100 bet, shout out Cosmo Sportsbook.
Yes, sir.
Florida might be the best team in the league this year. And so ironically, I might say Boston's the team the Leafs should most want to face. Not that it would be easy by any stretch, but I don't think that they're quite the big bad Bruins of old. And they have some own questions in their net. Jeremy Swayman's doing well. He's a young player, but how is he going to withstand that? I mean, it hasn't worked so well with Allmark there. So I would actually order it in reverse for what probably you should want from a hockey standpoint. But Leafs fans are going to feed this through their own narrative. I don't blame them. They've seen a lot of Game 7 losses against Boston. None of them they've all been sort of like differently, achingly, painfully predictable, I guess, in a sense. So that's how it goes. But yeah, I actually want to see Toronto Tampa. I've wanted to see that for a couple of years. I don't know why. I just think it'd be fun. I've covered the Lightning a ton, probably more than any team, kind of like team that still has its core of this generation. Like I covered a lot of Penguins over the years because Crosby's been there, but obviously the team's changed a lot. But I just know a lot of people in that organization, know the players. And I even asked Steven Stamkos about it at the All-Star game. I said, like, are you thinking Toronto? He's like, I've been thinking this for years. He's like, I know what's going to happen. So like, I think they want it too, just for the spectacle of it. And it'd be kind of cool with Tampa trying a campaign for their 3rd straight cup, and the Leafs literally life and death. I just think there's to be so much offense in that series. Vasilevsky versus Campbell / Mrazek is probably a pretty big deciding factor in Tampa's corner. But I think it'd be a fun series.
Yeah, I think it would be a fun series as well. We will end this Leafs corner with a note that is a little bit sadder than some of the other stuff we've mentioned to this point, and that deals with prospect Rodion sorry, excuse me, Rodion Amirov, excuse me, was diagnosed with a brain tumor earlier this week. The Leafs management announced that in a statement. It's really unfortunate to hear him go through this. It's really sad. I know his agent Dan Milstein was tweeting about it. They also put out an email asking for fans to, if they want to wish him well, they could send their well wishes to that email. A lot of people in the hockey world have given their well wishes to Rodion as well. CJ, it's very much an unfortunate situation for the prospect. It
is, and 20 years old. I think if you can find some hope in the fact, though. I read it. Elliot Friedman did a great job at Sportsnet speaking to Rodion, and you can tell he's still hopeful despite his circumstances here. And that I'm no medical expert, obviously, but I think the spiritual side of that is positive. That he's committed to wanting to be an example for future people that have to deal with something like this. He's still skating 3 times a week. He's working out every day. I have to imagine that at least helps him believe that there's going to be good days on the other side of what he's dealing with his health situation in Germany. He was a pick in 2020 by the Leafs at the 15th spot, that kind of a high upside pick in a sense. Not a safe bet at that position, but a player that had sort of a longer term potential to be, something special. And, now we're just hoping for, him to come out and live a healthy life, more than that. But, he wants to play pro hockey. Humans can do amazing things. We've seen it with Oscar Lindblom way back when, John Cullen, Mario Lemieux. I mean, players have dealt with illnesses and come out and continued NHL careers. And
Saku Koivu.
Yeah, Saku Koivu. I mean, what a moment that was. I mean, so, Amirov, I'm certainly not going to place any limitations on him. I don't have all the details of his condition or the exact, situation he's dealing with this tumor, but, we wish him well. And I know he's going to get great medical care with the Leafs staff and his team from the KHL. It's been a tough season for him. The way this came about, he got injured right at the start of the year, collarbone and concussion issue. And during the testing, and he had, as he tried to make his comeback from that, they discovered this further problem. I mean, maybe that's a blessing in disguise too, that they were able to discover this and find some treatment path for it too. But he basically didn't play this year in the KHL. And so, it's going to be a long road for him if he is able to resume his professional career. But as I say, I know he'll have good support there, and he's got a great attitude. You can tell by reading Elliot's article. And if you didn't do that already, I would recommend you go to Sportsnet and find it.
Absolutely. I'm going to just get a jump on our stick tap segment, and you can leave yours for the end, but I will give mine to Rodion just in the hopes that he can battle this and just have himself a good recovery. Rodion Amirov, I give him my stick tap for this week. I can't imagine what going through something like that is like. And the fact that he's still trying to keep himself in good condition amidst all of that that's incredible to me. I don't know how you're able to do that. So Rodion deserves the stick tap from me. And I think if you are able to wish him well, I don't have the email in front of me from his agent, Dan Milstein, but I know he's tweeted that out on his Twitter. Feel free to send him well wishes over there. And, from both of us, CJ and I, we wish him all the best going forward.
Mindset and attitude and everything, brother. Mindset and attitude.
Absolutely. That is a very good point.
I guess I'll give my stick tap because it'd be weird for me to give it later in the show. And also on a serious topic, so maybe the mood is right. But
that's fair.
Isabelle Khurshudyan gets my stick tap. A good friend of mine from back in the day used to cover the Washington Capitals for the Washington Post, and she's one of the few sports writers that actually got a real job when she grew up. And she's been a correspondent for the Post in Moscow for the last couple of years, and she's currently in Ukraine. And I don't know yet. Haven't have a fully formed idea on this, Julian, yet about the ramifications of the war that's just started there with Russia. Obviously, there is some NHL ties. There's a lot of Russian players in the league. I suspect they'll start getting asked about this. But I just want Isabelle to know we're thinking of her. We want her to stay safe as she's over there covering the war. And just sending good vibes out to my friend because hard to believe she was covering a Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago. worrying about what the shots were in game 2, and now she's in a legitimate dangerous spot in the world and reporting on something far more important.
Absolutely. That's very well said. The last thing I'll just add on that is I understand if people are watching and listening to this podcast and they think it's a weird time right now and you're feeling a little unsettled. We get that. It's a bit of a tough time. And just, my hearts are with a lot of people in Ukraine kind of dealing with this right now. It's a bit of an unfortunate situation. It's a bit of a tough transition to go back to talking about other stories in the NHL, but that's what we're going to do. We go from the Leafs corner to stick taps to Filip Forsberg. I'm sure you saw the tweet from Andy Strickland on Wednesday night suggesting that the Nashville Predators could somehow move on from Filip Forsberg. That would be a very interesting piece ahead of the trade deadline. I think at one point the Nashville Predators were looking pretty good in their division, kind of fallen off just a little bit. But this was a team that last year we all thought this was going to be a team that was going to have to sell off some assets. Then they powered through and made it to the playoffs. They find themselves in an interesting position now. And Filip Forsberg being available, I have a lot of questions about that. CJ, what do you think about this situation?
I think it's very much ongoing. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be stunned if they were truly, not to parse the words in Andy's tweet, but like if they're truly aggressively shopping him, like that I don't buy. I think ideally both sides probably want to extend their relationship and find a way to sign him to another contract. He's been a fantastic player for them throughout his career, having a monster season, frankly, 26 goals in 38 games for Nashville, holding up his end of the bargain. Problem is there's a price tag with that. And, they have a number of players on decent sized salaries, from Ryan Johansson, Matt Duchene, and so how much do you pay him? How long do you pay him? That's the dance being tangoed. I do know that he's not expecting a trade, at least at this point. And so, I guess if it gets to March 21st and they don't find a contract extension and Nashville has slid way below the playoff line, I could see a world where he's traded. Look, he's the type of player that gets traded at the deadline. But to me, the Predators are still in the playoff hunt. I believe Filip Forsberg wants to remain in Nashville, all things being equal. I don't know how much of a hometown discount there'll be to get there. I mean, at his stage of his career, this is a big contract, obviously. But it's not like they're trying to get him out of town so badly. I don't think it should be framed that way. And quite honestly, if he's available, man, like everyone who was excited about JT Miller and JT Miller might not be traded. I mean, you better be calling David Poile now because, it's hard to imagine someone who could fit that kind of role in a lineup. So that's your New York Rangers, your Toronto Maple Leafs, a bunch of other teams. You can't tell me. And anyone who could fit his salary under the cap could probably find a use for him in a playoff run. And if he's on your second line, you got a team that's certainly capable of scoring a lot of goals. So, I think that this will be a situation to monitor is the best way to put it. But my sense is not that it's 100% decided he's being traded. I think it's more likely everyone getting their ducks in a row if they can't sign a contract. And look, the trade deadline is a deadline of sorts potentially for that contract. But even honestly, if it gets there and he hasn't signed, like the Predators got to want to make the playoffs this year. And I just don't see a trade as much as you want to retain some value for your asset or receive some value. Like, as I was mentioning I mentioned about 10 Leafs players that have been walked to free agency the last few years because they were trying to have the best team possible each of those years. And then you got to let them go. I didn't mention Zach Hyman and Frederik Andersen last summer, but add those to the long list. I think that Nashville's in a position where it's hard to imagine David Poile at this stage of his career with how much is riding on the season on their end of things will want to weaken his team's hand with that. So I think it's a little bit of, look, who knows where leaks come from, but I just wonder if it's part of the negotiation process that's going on behind the scenes.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we're going to have to
targeted. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that like someone specifically leaked it to put pressure on them, but like sometimes it feels that way. Right. And look, this is a time where a lot of teams do call their teams and their hypotheticals are thrown out. And then sometimes, broken telephone gets played this time of year. And, this one maybe on one hand comes out of nowhere, but on the other, I would say, look, he's an expiring contract. He's having a great season. And if you're Nashville, maybe you're just gauging what you might get because that's part of the decision-making process.
We're going to have to monitor the situation as it follows, CJ. Another situation I did not expect us to talk about at all on this podcast. I did not expect throughout the lifespan of this podcast, however long this would last, that we would ever have to bring up this man's name. But Sean Avery is playing professional hockey. What the, like, in the ECHL with the Orlando Solar Bears? He's trying to come back to the NHL at the tender age of 41 years old. This is weird. Why?
While selling tickets. So because they're getting, we're talking about it, right? I mean, this is all promotion. You know, what's funny is I got a text actually on Tuesday from a player in the league, like with that story, and just like, laugh emojis basically. And like, that's how I learned about it. And then I wrote back, I said, over under, he plays 9.5 shifts this season. And, and he took the under. So like,
oh no.
Because the reason 9.5 was a bit of a random grab, but I'm thinking like I could see him playing a period. Like I could see him getting like 3 or 4 shifts, but I can't imagine A, he's going to play a whole game, or B, like play multiple games. And so I just tried to, and so right now that I established an unofficial betting line with no terms of a bet at 9.5 shifts total in the ECHL, 10 years after his career ended for Sean Avery. And at least one active professional player is saying under. So I think that this will come and go, and obviously he'll probably get in a game or a shift, and then because Sean Avery recently posted video, I remember seeing it, where he was like first time on the ice in X amount of time, and he looked a little bit like Steve Dangle did in those Steve Dangle learned to skate videos. So. Okay. And I'm firing those shots at the guy who has not been skating much lately and was never good to begin with, or never good enough to talk about. So anyway, this is a total promotional stunt, and it'll be funny when he gets in a game. But again, I don't see him playing any meaningful amount of time.
I don't know about you, but the biggest thing I took from that is that if an ECHL team is looking for Sean Avery to play, Steve Dangle better get his skating up. He might have a shot too.
Hey, if you're looking to get the Dangle Navy fired up, get some engagement on your socials. You could do worse than to sign Steve Dangle to your reserve team.
Yeah, you get like SDP. Yeah, sign Steve Dangle and then have like SDPN Fest in like Jacksonville. Jacksonville has an ECHL team. The Iceman. Hey, I remember.
The Chris Johnston Show is willing to travel in support of the SDPN. So anywhere they need us to be. We're open for business, Steve. If you can get some sort of ECHL deal, we'll broadcast live from the game. It'll be great.
Yes, we could go with that. But I'm glad you think this is as ridiculous as I thought. Sean Avery trying to make a comeback. Again, trying to get back to the NHL. He's 41 years old. He might not even cut it for ECHL play.
Basketball and hockey, very much in full swing. And for many of us, there's no better way to enjoy the games than by having some skin in the game. That is why BetMGM remains the exclusive betting partner of The Athletic. And as a fan of The Athletic, you can bet $10 to win $150 plus a free 3-month subscription or extension of your subscription to The Athletic when you bet with BetMGM using our promo code. Sign up at betmgm.com and use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. That's bet $10 to win $150 plus 3 months free from The Athletic at betmgm.com, and you have to use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout. The Athletic Pod, all in one word. New customer offer. Visit betmgm.com for terms and conditions.
We didn't even get to the story of Marie-Philippe Poulin, who turned down an ECHL deal to play with the Lions of Trois-Rivières out in Quebec. That's actually a much more interesting story than Sean Avery trying to come back. And I actually should have brought that up earlier, but I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you have any insight on that.
I actually missed that entirely, if I'm being honest with you. And the
that's wild, yeah.
I didn't even see that. I didn't know anything about it. Did she give any reasoning or like why?
I haven't really seen much of the reasoning out there. It's funny. It's like I had seen that the interest was out there, and then I was on the Athletic Hockey Show on Monday with Ian Mendez, and we actually spoke to Cheryl Pounder about it. I thought the interview was pretty great. And at that point, that's what I really learned. That like, okay, she turned it down. Truthfully, like just before we started, that's what I learned. She had turned down the move to play in the ECHL. And Cheryl brought up a really interesting point with that, in the fact that if Marie-Philip Poulin turning the deal down to play in this men's league, it's a way of her showing that, you know what, she still wants to grow the game on the women's side, and she wants to do it by being in the women's game and not necessarily going off onto the men's side to try to do that. And I think there's a noble point there. Instead of, playing in a men's league, you say, you know what, we're going to stay committed to growing the game on our side. And I thought Cheryl made some really interesting points. If you're listening to this on The Athletic, feel free to go back to Monday's show and also go on Tuesday's show, where you could hear Craig Custance and Sean Gentili sing the Canadian national anthem after losing a bet to me and Ian. But anyway, enough plugs.
I'll tell you this. It's an individual choice. Like, it's funny because it goes two ways, right? Like, Haley Wickenheiser went and played pro in Finland when she was at the height of her career. And you can understand that because she wants to push herself to see how good she could be, right? Like, she was at kind of the women's game at that time. So I would support Marie-Philip Poulin in either way, because I think if she had a similar nagging idea that there's something more, then why not try it? But, this is a really delicate time for the women's sport in the sense that you're coming off that being the most watched event, the gold medal game of the women's final. Now, I get that that's the pinnacle game for 4 years of that sport. So it's hard to compare that to then having club teams in various cities playing each other. But, I think that they've got to find a way. Like, anyway, I know this is a hard time in a sense. Like, a lot of businesses are still struggling, and it's hard circumstances to pull something like this together, but it's just way more than time to have a league where the top female players can at least make a living wage, not have to work other jobs to supplement their lives, and have a chance to compete against each other and grow a fan base. Because it's pretty clear there's a group of people that will watch that enough, and you got to invest. Someone's got to invest in it. Hopefully it's the NHL at some point that's at least coming forward with the money, even if they don't brand it, maybe. But it's a pretty strong stance from Poulin to stay in that fight to get that, because I know a lot of people have invested years into that battle, and I'm hoping it produces something sooner rather than later.
Yep, I think that's a good way to put it, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. And I think this is a good place to end our Thursday edition of the Chris Johnston Show. CJ, another good week in the books, and we go on to next week and the week after that and the week after that and the week after that, because the CJ Show is undefeated, sir.
Oh man, it was nearly defeated today. I got to tell you an honest story. So, taping at 8:30, which isn't early, and I didn't have a late night last night, but I woke up this morning, snoozed the alarm, and then had that panic wake up that I'd slept through 8:30. But it was 8:20.
Oh, God.
So I had 4 minutes, give or take, to fire up the camera and get on with you today. So that was nearly a CJ bogey, but glad that hasn't happened yet. It's actually amazing. I don't know how many episodes we've done, but they're predominantly taped in the morning, and neither of us has missed the time due to a sleep in.
I believe this is episode 43. We've done 43 of these episodes. I'm trying to count now. So 43 is today. So next week would be, I think, 3 weeks before the deadline. So I'm trying to think if our trade deadline episode might coincide with like our 50th episode. Like, that would be pretty funny.
Yeah, it would either be the one after trade deadline or two after trade deadline. But basically, yeah, because trade deadline, we're going to do a Tuesday episode to look back on the day that was, and
yeah,
that'll be a rare Tuesday, but that'll be worth listening to because we'll be sorting through the wreckage of that day.
And that also means the Thursday episode before that is going to be jam-packed with a whole bunch of trade stuff too, because that's the last episode before the trade deadline. So
maybe we'll have to jam an extra episode in at that time, like depending on how much news there is. I mean,
I'm down if you're down. I will make myself available to do that.
I was going to say, that hasn't been something we've done, but maybe we can do some kind of weekend episode too, depending on if the news warrants, let's workshop that. I haven't run that by the boss yet. I don't know if he wants us to do that, but why not?
I'm willing to do that. Also, people watching or listening to this, tweet at Adam Wild that it's something that you might want. Let us know in the comments if it's something that you want. I know I want it. If CJ's down, I'm down. We'll find a way to make that work.
I'll just make sure not to snooze my alarm that morning.
Yeah, well, hopefully on a weekend you won't have to use an alarm. Well, unless you have to go to like a morning skate, I guess, for some reason. But it happens, I guess. In the meantime, subscribe to the Chris Johnston Show wherever you listen to podcasts. On YouTube, SDPN is the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that so you can get full episodes there and clips of the show. You can listen to the episode ad-free on The Athletic if you're subscribed to The Athletic. And of course, as always, check out Chris Johnston's stuff in the Toronto Star, the Inside the NHL column that comes out periodically, and some of his other fun stuff there too. For CJ, I'm Julian, saying so long and peace. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode of The Chris Johnston Show.
Stay safe, Izzy.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.